What do you like to say usually?
Just do, hello, welcome to Queer Cinema. I'm Allison, I'm Joe.
You want me to say both of our names?
Well, no, I'll say my name.
Why don't we do, hi, I'm Allison, I'm Joe. This is Queer Cinema Catchup, the show where we catch up with one another.
I just like starting off with the title of the show and then who we are. You know, because we're nobodies right now.
I just don't see why it matters so much, but hi, I'm Allison.
So you're going to do what you want to do again.
No, you should have started if you have such a specific desire. Okay. Hi, welcome to Queer Cinema Catchup. I'm Allison.
I'm Joe.
And this is the show where we talk about movies, queer film, miscellaneous items, and we catch up with one another.
Or maybe the movies aren't even queer, but we look at them through a queer lens.
Yes, exactly.
And today's a very special episode because it is actually our first part 2 episode where we'll be completing our discussion about the Hulu TV show Under the Bridge.
We finished watching it the other night, and should we give a brief recap of the show?
Yeah.
Okay, so those of you who didn't listen to episode 1 or haven't been watching the series, is based on a true story about a young woman, Reena Virk's murder, a young teenager's murder in the 90s in Victoria, Canada, at the hands of other teenagers in that same town. And it kind of follows the crime, what happens after the crime, and the trial told through the lens of multiple perspectives, including the perspective of a woman, Vritika Gupta, who was a real woman who wrote a book about this tragedy and crime and was from that area. But she didn't live there anymore at the time of the crime.
And so this is based on a true story about Reena Virk and her murder. And we do want to be sensitive to the fact that this show is based on real people's lives. And
that's something that did occur to us as we continued to watch. There was something about the beginning. You think she might still be alive, even though we know that's not the case. I guess I don't remember if I knew. I don't think I knew if she was alive or not. But regardless, as we continue to watch, we kind of we're becoming more aware of how the family in question, this was only in the 90s, so they're all still alive. You know, this isn't like a crime from the ancient past. It's pretty recent. So I don't know. I felt the decision to make it probably wasn't taken lightly, and the decision to watch it maybe shouldn't be taken lightly either. Yeah. I don't know.
And there is a queer storyline in this show, but it was made up.
Yes. So I found out some more information. You know how you mentioned last time we talked about the show that Vritika Gupta, the journalist character, the writer character, passed away from lung cancer shortly before the TV series came out.
Yeah, right before filming.
So I found out that when the creator, Quinn Shepard, was sort of tapped to create this show, I don't know exactly how it went down, who reached out to who first, but when she was put in touch with Vritika Gupta or sought her out, whatever it might be, Vritika already knew that she was dying and revealed this to Quinn Shepard over the course of their initial meetings, maybe a couple months in. And so they were very aware that time was running out, and I think Vritika even said something like, we'll get through what we can get through, or something like that, and that was kind of the mantra propelling them forward. And so I think there was this weight and urgency behind what was being written. And then to your point, the invented parts of Cam, the female cop character who's in a situationship with Rebecca, that part was invented, but the death of Rebecca's brother, her brother really did drown. Now I don't know the circumstances and how invented that was, but that was all real. And the creator, Quinn Shepard, she had access to all her diaries, all her notes from back then. And she'd be really worried every time she turned in a script, oh no, this is too personal. And then she would get a note back from Rebecca being I didn't like Joe's line here. And she wouldn't address the
queer storyline.
Or even just the other personal stuff about her brother or anything like that. And so I think Rebecca understood this was going to be one of her last projects that she was going to see completed. And it was intimately tied to her life. And they had to ask her permission to put her into the show. And I think she knew she wasn't going to come across as a hero necessarily, but a flawed real person. And I think she really wanted that out there and wanted to explore what guilt can do to a person and how people can do bad things.
Yeah.
And all of that.
Well, it's such an interesting backstory to Rebecca. And it gives me comfort in a way that she was aware of what was going into the story. So it wasn't she was completely unaware as she passed on. So I don't know what to talk about. So I re-listened to our part 1 episode, or at least part of it. And we were so stoked about this show. We were so excited. We thought it was the best thing ever. I think at the time we were 4 episodes in, and there's 8 episodes total, right?
I think so.
I think maybe the way we'll do this is we'll go through our reaction of how we felt going through the entire show. And then if we want to here and there, give out some plot points.
Yeah.
And some concluding thoughts.
For me, it definitely was a journey because I definitely was. And it's interesting to think about this in the terms of queer representation because I won't lie. I definitely think that I was already pretty hooked because the beginning was so... Would you say at the beginning was very emotionally, and you really felt for every character on the screen? You were kind of even Josephine, who seemed really scary. I was really intrigued by her. And then it kind of did set up that mystery. And I read something where like they didn't want it to be a mystery. They wanted it to be like you're watching the show deep down inside. You already know what happened and you really don't want to know that truth. So it's kind of the experience of willfully ignoring the truth, which is kind of what the Rebecca characters does with the kids. But then Hulu was like, we want some mystery. So like the beginning really had a lot of mystery. Mm-hmm. It had these like characters that were interesting. And then it in like episode 2 or whatever, there was this queer storyline. And I was like, amazing. I'm on board. So it definitely hooked me, which is odd to think about how that was that intentional on the part of the creators. They didn't really talk about that. I haven't seen any interviews, I'm sure it's out there, that talked about the reason they made them queer, unless that was like true to Rebecca and they just
because back to what you said about Rebecca, she was reading these scripts, so why, and if they had access to the diaries, maybe there was
like a queer romance in her life.
Yeah, romance.
I don't know. So then there was that part, hooked. Middle part, I started to get a little annoyed.
After we recorded.
Yeah, after we recorded.
So episode 5 onward.
Episode 5 and 6 maybe?
Yeah.
I just kind of became more aware that it was a show about something real maybe. And then also I was kind of more aware of how they were using Rebecca and Cam's character. I don't know if you felt like this too, but Rebecca's kind of like this lady who came back into town from New York. She's writing about these kids. She's like seeing the story of it all, kind of like us, the viewers. Mm-hmm. She's sympathizing with who we find out is a murderer. And then Cam on the other side of the equation is like, this is a real crime against a girl who died. And you don't seem to be aware of the weight of that. And nobody in this town seems to be aware of the weight of that. They're excusing everybody else's behavior. And for me, it's really real and really personal. And that is a good story or a good theme to explore, but it just felt very like inelegant or like...
It almost felt kind of melodramatic and soap opera at times.
Yeah.
Like,
and maybe it was just the romance.
It was just they both were on opposite extremes. And it just kind of, everything seemed to be so heightened and extreme. And I remember on the podcast, you had said that you were excited by the idea that you thought that was going to be like Cam and Rebecca were going to be together and doing like a whodunit where...
Like feeding information from the press to the cops.
Exactly. But no, it's that they just kind of used the romance as a chance for them to be intertwined, but then have opposite opinions.
And to talk kind of about the political and like cultural optics of this in a way that like should be talked about, but maybe in a TV show feels, I don't know how to explain it, like less rooted in character and more... Like, we're aware that there's some problematic things about Rebecca's book. We know. And so we're going to, like, tell you via a character. Like, I don't feel like they were, like, using the Cam character in a way that was uncomfortable to me. But by the end, I shifted my opinion again. But this is, like, kind of in the middle.
Oh, interesting. So because Rebecca's book was so sympathetic to Warren
I think
in a lot of it? Okay.
Because it said at the end, Rebecca and Warren remained in touch for 20 years.
Wow.
And also, Warren was very remorseful. He realized that he had some Native heritage at some point. He got really interested in restorative justice based on looking into his own culture. And then he really wanted to work in that field later on and to use those practices when trying to apply for parole. And he actually had the Virks present at his final parole hearing. And I think they were like kind of supportive because he had expressed remorse. So that part about the mercy at the end of the finale was really true. So I feel like we should say that even though.
Yeah.
Anyway, continue.
Yeah, I think we were really excited that the first 4 episodes had been so surprising and engaging. And it didn't feel like your typical whodunit storyline or crime show. It really felt elevated. I think in episodes 5 and 6 especially kind of felt more melodramatic. And then also there was a behind the scenes element that you were theorizing about Riley Keough in real life.
Oh, yeah.
And some of the filming.
Yeah.
What you think might be happening behind the scenes.
In real life, Riley Keough's mother had passed away. And so I think that added like weight. I mean, she's a very talented person, so I'm sure she could have done this without tragedy, but like you could feel like the weight of the grief that was being referenced from her past and the grief of the present too. But then there were a few scenes where like Riley's character, Rebecca's character, was like isolated from others or like maybe with one other character, but kind of like sitting across from them. So they were never really in the same shot. She does like acid. Is that what she does?
Yeah.
And she kind of goes on like this big trip and it kind of is tied to her brother's death. She like sees her brother talking to her. But I was wondering if it's because she wasn't available. And then there were other shots of her and Cam where it was like very close up, cutting between the two faces. And I was like, were they even in the same room for very long or at all? I don't know.
I just really noticed it with Warren and Rebecca scenes in that when they were in the warehouse
where
together.
The boy gang gathers and beats each other up, each other up.
And that's just when I started to like lose interest and it kind of just seemed like it was stretching beyond what I was hoping it would be. And then I think episode 7 was okay. And then I thought episode 8, they really turned it around for the finale and they returned back to the roots of what made the first few episodes so strong.
Yeah, I think like by episode 7 and 8, they kind of found that their footing again. They returned to that multi-perspective approach. Like pretty much every character gets a lot of empathy with the exception of Kelly Ellard, who is one of the murderers.
Is painted
like
as
a psychopath.
Supervillain psychopath.
So I read that the creator was like, we did a lot of research. And I should mention, they not only used Rebecca Godfrey's book, but also Manjeet Virk, the father of Reena, who wrote a book about her.
Okay.
They used that as source material too. And they did all this like archival research, et cetera, et cetera. And they said they could find no evidence. Everybody else, they could find some kind of extenuating circumstance or reason that they were like Dusty. She was one of the few, very young, few people to speak out and said we were monsters, we should have gotten more time or whatever. You know, they, all this other stuff where remorse was found or like extenuating circumstances in their background, explain what was going on in their lives, but not for Kelly, supposedly.
They didn't find any evidence?
They didn't find any like reason why we could feel sympathy for her. So they didn't put it into the show. But I'm like, maybe, I mean, if she really did what she did in court, that was a little crazy.
So she goes on the stand and she is being questioned and she starts out answering in a British accent.
Yes.
As she's being interrogated and more pressure is being applied to her, she just freaks out and starts screaming that she did not do the murder.
It's very aggressive.
She will never admit to the murder. She did not do it. She just repeats it over and over and over again.
And then she starts sobbing. And then the judge at the end is like, we're going to give you less time because, you know, you have good grades. And she was able to afford an attorney, all this stuff. So, yeah. But then apparently she was tried again. There was a mistrial, but then she went to prison, but then she was granted day parole, which is something in Canada where they're like allowed out during the day, but then they have to come back to jail at night. But then that was revoked. So now she's still in jail and she's not applying for prison, not applying for parole right now for some reason. But I do think it's interesting. If you're going to write a show where everybody is seen empathetically, and if that's like the ethos of Rebecca's book, it just seems strange to have like a character who is a supervillain without kind of like, I feel like aren't psychopaths also like born of trauma? I don't really know, but that was an interesting note.
Yeah. And then to give Warren so much empathy at times where I felt it kind of is overdone. I
mean, that actor is just so endearing and adorable that I do feel like that maybe is why, because you just look at him and you feel like, oh, that poor little child. And then when you hear what he actually did, it's like awful. And
yeah, which I guess is true to real life is
probably.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought it was interesting that the kind of drama of the last 2 episodes and why I started to be more invested again is because I wanted to know if Warren was going to tell the truth. And that was kind of the propelling force of the last 2 episodes.
Yeah. And honestly, maybe that's why I was getting so frustrated with episodes 5 and 6. Yes, it was being very melodramatic. I also just was really upset with the decisions that Rebecca was making of being so sympathetic to Warren and not to the victim. So that was really frustrating.
Horrible.
But then come to find out in the end, it's all to give her an arc. She has a line, and maybe it's one of the quotes that you have, is she thought that she's like, I thought Warren reminded me of my brother, but in the end I actually realized he reminded me of myself.
Yes. Once she said it, it's like one of those things you kind of already know on the inside because you know she feels guilt. Basically there's this flashback to teenage her being really cruel to her brother, and then he like leaves the house, and then the next thing they know, some people are at the door saying he fell off a cliff near their home, wondering if like, did he fall, did he jump, was it because of me, her whole life. I thought that was really effective. But I do have a quote, and apparently that was like based on something real that the real Rebecca Godfrey said. Let me find it. This is the creator, Quinn Shepard, speaking. A lot of people in her life had suggested that Warren must have reminded her of her brother. The final conversations I had with her were about the fact that in the end, she realized that it was more about what she saw of herself in him than anything else. And that's why she felt this way moving through the world, being shaped by guilt forever, a quest to people understand how people could do a bad thing. It all came from that. So I mean, that's like kind of what I'm saying with like the Rebecca character versus the Cam character. I'm sure they had writers who had the experience that the Cam character had, but it felt like the Rebecca character felt really like real and fleshed out. And then Cam's character, like her desire to go to Victoria, and then her like, kind of grappling with what's going on and feeling conflicted and disturbed by what's happening, that all felt real. But like I thought it was an odd choice to wait until the very end to let her find out about her backstory. Yeah. I had a feeling like in the middle, like, oh, she's probably going to stop being a cop at the end, which I think is a great arc, but I just don't think they like had as much space for that. And maybe it's because Quinn was having all these conversations with the real Rebecca, and then Cam is an invented character, which, you know, is unfortunate because they had to invent a character like that. That wasn't part of the real story.
Yeah, they really lost the thread with Cam's character. So it's just such a shame. I just feel like they kind of...
Even though Lily really sold it, as she always does.
But, I mean, the actor can only do so much.
Like, I wish that she'd started discovering her own past maybe in episode 6 or 7, because Rebecca goes on a journey.
Yeah. Her role just kind of turned into shock and disbelief of Rebecca's actions.
Disenchantment. Although I did like the scene where she goes and talks to Dusty and kind of, I don't know if you remember that scene.
Yeah,
like
where she's like, if you testify, you're screwed. If you don't testify, you're screwed.
And she's like, why are you telling me this? And so
but then doesn't Cam go to her dad and try to get her testimony? Because that's what would get her in trouble, is if she if
she
would just stand and told the truth, because it wasn't what she wrote on the paper. So then she tried to convince her dad. Tried to convince her dad.
Yeah.
It was like, well, what if I force the signature? What if I force the signature myself?
Oh, yeah. I think Dusty didn't have to testify in the end. I feel like I would have remembered, but then I kind of do remember her.
Dusty did testify.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay. But I feel like that moment when Cam talks to Josephine and Dusty, and I feel like in one of the scenes, she's not wearing her cop. The second time when she goes to Josephine, she's no longer wearing her cop uniform, which I think is another signal that she's going to leave the force. And Josephine's like, what the fuck are you wearing? Which I thought was, you know, true to the character and kind of like this like small moment of levity that kind of hinted at the journey that was happening.
Is she wearing a robe?
Well, no. I don't think so. Yeah. I would say by the end, I came around to it. Let me see. I quickly want to tell you something funny.
Okay.
So last night I was reading some interviews with the creator, with the girl who plays Reena, who's only 14 years old. I was very impressed. That's not the funny part of it. I'm just really impressed. And side note, I read that the creators were like, it's really important to us that we cast girls who are actually that age or it won't work. And I agree that made it very excellent. And they had therapists and counselors and such on set to help these children if they needed it during production. But I was Googling Under the Bridge. I went to, you know, as you do, I don't know if you ever do this, Joe, but you go to Google and then you go to news and you search. So I typed in Under the Bridge and I hit news, and a bunch of it was like interviews, reviews, etc. And then I go to page 2 and there was this article. And it was like, should I live under a bridge? I get $5,600 a month in Social Security and retirement income. And I didn't click on it, but I think we should investigate.
Yeah.
Okay. But it made me sad. There was only one page. Oh, here it is. From Market Watch. Should I live under a bridge? Oh, it's actually sad. I'm a 76-year-old widower who's a retired school teacher.
Oh my gosh.
He's looking for a financial advisor. You know what? I have a feeling this isn't a real person. They posted this and they knew that show was coming out. It worked. Market Watch, you got me. You got me.
I want to watch out for you, Market Watch. Some people are under the bridge. Oh. Other people are under the weather.
Yeah, me. So I think I mentioned I was in Mexico City, and I was really conscious of the fact that I didn't want to get Montezuma's revenge. And I thought I did a pretty good job, but I did have ice at a couple points in time. But several days went by, like 3, after getting back. And then I seemingly got it. So I'm a little worried.
But I've been feeling funky too.
But you haven't actually been, have you been sick?
I have like a tummy ache. Tummy ache.
Well, I hope it doesn't become anything more serious and it goes away.
Well, we also theorized because we got crepes
Yeah.
before Furiosa.
And then
we also been eating
we got each
chocolate chip cookies from Lazy Acres. And we got big ass bags of candy.
Yeah.
From the candy shop in the Grove.
So
there's been a lot of poor eating decisions.
There's been a lot of that. And maybe I just like pushed myself over the edge by being in Mexico City, eating a lot of delicious food that I don't usually eat.
Maybe I've been so stressed out about my car that had shut down on me last week. So to give you all an update on my car, it broke down last week. I know you guys are all curious about my car situation.
We are.
And then it started driving fine. And I even drove to and from work yesterday. My 2-hour commute. And I had an appointment set up to go to the car shop today. So I took my car in this morning and I get over to the dealership and I get everything filled out and I'm getting in my Uber to go home. And one of the car mechanics like runs after me and he tells me exasperated. He's like, your car battery just died. It died. It's jump started. He's like, man, what like timing? You're so lucky that you got it in here. Like wouldn't have started otherwise. So I feel very fortunate.
That's really wild.
Yeah, I got the tune-up on my car and I got a new battery and now hopefully I should be set to go for another 10,000 miles.
I don't know anything about
I've had my car for 5 years. Yeah, let's talk about that.
I don't know anything about cars. I don't know anything about cars. Like when I call an Uber,
well, no,
unless it's like a Toyota.
Let's take a step back.
No, I'll get there. But let me tell you, I need to lay the foundation here. Unless it's like a Toyota, which I do know what Toyotas look like, mostly by looking at the symbol. And now I know what a Tesla looks like because so many Uber drivers in LA have Teslas.
They do.
It's shocking. It's strange. Make it make sense to me. It doesn't make sense to me. But anyhow, I don't know. Any car could be coming toward me. I don't know. I know what your car looks like, Joe, but I could have a friend for like 3 years and I will not recognize their car. Like I'm just really bad with cars. And I also don't have a car. And yes, I live in Los Angeles.
How has your experience been living in LA without a car?
I would say we live in a really walkable area. So I don't need a car to go to the grocery store, for example. And I feel like this is very different from most Angelinos, but like the Target, every other city I've lived in, I've always walked to the grocery store. And I don't find that annoying. I mean, sure, I can't buy like a bed and bring it home. But in general,
that's your go-to example.
A bed. But I can get my groceries. I can go on my walk. We live right by Griffith. I have access to nature. I can go to Los Feliz and get coffee or go to the bookstore. So in that sense, I don't feel like it's that big of a deal. But when I had to commute to different offices, that was very awful. But now I work remotely. And I don't, once again, find myself in a position of like, we have a debate about this. And, you know, anyone who wants to email us can email us back. But I just kind of think like on the whole, car versus Uber in this day and age, when it's really expensive, kind of probably evens out. Except you can't do cool road trips, and that does make me sad. But I also don't really like driving.
I don't know what to say. I'm thankful for having a car.
If I were to stay here forever and ever and ever, eventually I would get one, probably an electric one. And now that seems more feasible to me. We'd have to give up our guest parking spot.
Then how could our neighbors park in the spot without asking your permission?
Okay, listen to this. One time, someone was parking in our spot downstairs. My spot, I should say. My spot. That's an important part of the story. And I forget how this first part went, but you were like, we should leave a note. Can you leave a note? Because you weren't here. You were somewhere else. And I said, sure. So I wrote a note. And I wrote it the way I would write it, which was like, hi there. You know, I know the spot's always empty, but it is my spot and we kind of use it for guests. So, you know, it's really okay if you do park here sometimes, but here's the number in case you need it. Thanks so much. Bye. And then Joe came home. I was like, did you see my note? He's like, yeah. And then like a day or two goes by. And then just like, by the way, I threw your note away and I wrote a new one.
That just said, do not park here. You get, because you're giving people a window into, yeah, they just park there all the time then because they'd be like, oh, this.
I guess I could read it out, but at the end of the day, it's fine.
There was another time.
This is a note story as well.
Yes. I was on a camping trip.
Oh, yeah.
I was gone for the weekend. So I come home and I go into the kitchen and the sink is full of water. And Allison had left a note saying that she had done everything she could, but the water in the sink would not empty out. Like you had tried to empty it out.
I had emptied. Oh, I remember what happened now. I'll tell you. But go ahead. Continue.
And then I'm like, I look at the sink and then I take a quarter of a step to the right where I press the garbage disposal button and all the water immediately goes down the sink. And I take Allison's sticky note and I go to throw it away. And she had written like 4 or 5 drafts of her note to me.
I forgot about that. Okay, from my side, something happened with the sink. I can't remember what. And it like totally backed up and all this water was coming in it. And I looked all around for the garbage disposal, but there was like something in front of the switch. For some reason, I like didn't see it. And so I actually emptied it all by hand with a cup. And it took a really long time. And then I was like, all right, I think it's okay now. And I don't know what I did, but I like turned the sink on or something and it immediately filled back up all the way with water. And I was like, I can't do that again. I can't. So I had to leave a note. I was like, well, I have to call a plumber. Also, I don't know why I didn't just put in a work request. I think it was a holiday weekend. But no matter what, a lot of questions about my behavior.
Yeah. Can we talk about the toilet?
Oh my gosh. Okay. Early in the morning, a bunch of us were going to Disneyland from our house. And it was a very stressful trip for multiple reasons. Fun, but stressful because like a lot of people trying to make sure everyone has a good time. Other things were happening in the background that made it even more stressful for me.
What? Oh.
Emotional turmoil. And I had a physical injury. Let me take you back really quickly to 2011. Oh. I don't know what happened, but we were driving back from the Poconos, me and my family. And I got out of the car when we finally got home. It was like a 3-hour drive. And I felt this like weird popping sensation in my lower back. And I don't know how, but my tailbone was like bruised or broken or something. And the only way to fix it is to sit on a circle pillow and hope that it heals. And it did heal and I was fine. But yeah, basically, again, this happened. It was the worst it had ever been. And I do think it was probably tied to the emotional turmoil in my life at the time. Just, you know, stress, bringing these things on. Basically, when you have a tailbone injury, if you are sitting down, you're fine. But then if you try and stand up, you seem like you're a hobbled individual. Like you can't stand up straight.
Allison literally looked like a 78-year-old woman. She has this jean dress and it was like really like,
no, it was the green dress.
Was it the green dress?
I hadn't belted
it. Was like,
it.
So, it was like it looked like a
sack.
A sack.
Usually I belt it so it looks nice.
She's hobbled over, can
a
barely
90-degree
walk.
angle. Okay. And then after a while, like, it'll loosen up and you can stand up again. It's fine. It just like hurts to move from sitting to standing, but you just need to move around a lot and eventually it will heal. And it healed. But anyway, that was happening. We get back
from a long day at Disney.
A whole full day. And we all go to bed. Me and my one friend were hanging out downstairs. And then I go to the bathroom and I'm like, there's like toilet paper in here. I try to flush and it completely overflows. And then my friend is like, oh, that sucks, and goes to bed. So then I'm like trying to clog this toilet. Water's everywhere. I'm like using cups or whatever to like help empty the water.
You used
It was my
your
Tupperware.
brand new Tupperware
Like,
when we literally had 5,000 plastic cups from fucking Witch, the sandwich shop.
I forgot about the witch. But yeah, so then I kind of get to a steady place, and then all of a sudden I hear the shower go on upstairs. So all of a sudden I'm like, oh no. And sure enough, the toilet begins to overflow again. So I run upstairs and tell my friend, I'm like, please turn that off. You cannot shower. And then I came back downstairs. I spent a really long time trying to clean it up. I got to a steady place. Then Joe was starting a new internship tomorrow. And I was like, I gotta tell him he can't shower.
Oh, yeah.
So I texted, please don't shower tomorrow. I know it's the worst text to receive on the day of a new job. But then another funny part of the story. So my other friend came over and we were all hanging out. And we called the plumber. And he might have been from like, maybe he was like Polish, I don't know. But he was like not from the States, most likely, just based on his accent. And I was like trying to explain the situation to him. I'm in like green dress, not belted. I'm at a 90-degree angle. I'm describing what's going on. He's like, okay. And he goes upstairs and I say to my friends, like, I just don't think he was really taking me very seriously. And they're like, well, yeah.
Were you standing talking to him?
Yeah. I think I had been standing for a while. I think I avoided sitting down, but nonetheless, I'm sure I didn't look 100% normal. But then what was hilarious was I swear to you, he was up there the whole time.
There was a cord.
Yeah, there was a big cord. There was a lot of noise. We thought that he was upstairs. And then all of a sudden, from outside, he emerges soaking wet, like dripping wet.
Yeah.
And he'd been down the garage doing something with the pipes.
That's crazy.
And he's like, it's fixed.
We've lived here since
June of 2021. Almost 3 years.
somehow it feels like not that long, but then it feels like we should be here longer in a way.
Yeah.
Also, there was a time when it was a really hot weekend in the summer.
Joe is finding lots of good stories
And
for you.
The AC, we have a Nest, and the Nest was still working and blowing out air, but I realized it was blowing out hot air. Yeah, it's set to cool. And Alice was going on a trip to Pennsylvania or somewhere, and it was like a Friday, and Allison comes in the door, and I was trying to get the AC to work, but it was blasting hot air out.
You were in your room.
I was in my room, and Allison comes home, she's like, it was so freezing in my Uber. This air feels so good. She throws her hands back and throws her head in the air as the hot air is blowing her. She's like, anyway, I'm gonna go get on my flight now. I was like, God damn it. And I was trapped here all weekend.
Okay.
It was so hot, and it was a holiday weekend, so we didn't have, there was nobody working on Monday too. And our friend came over also, and we were like watching TV. I think he's supposed to stay here, but then he decided not to because it was so miserable.
Awful.
I just remember watching TV and like I could feel the back of my knees sweating.
Yeah, that's awful.
That is the worst feeling.
Yeah, my Uber, I do remember it was a historic heat wave.
Yeah.
It's completely unacceptable that we did not have AC. If I had been here, I would have written many emails. Yeah. And then I would have probably been embarrassed because they would have been like, relax, someone's coming. But it was not right. Because like, for example, like we would be fine because we're like young and healthy, but there could be families living, you know what I'm saying? Like kids or old people. It's not okay. It could be dangerous. It could be a lawsuit.
How do we tie this back into Under the Bridge?
Well, okay. So it really doesn't tie back into Under the Bridge, but I am curious, would you say that you thought it was good?
Yeah, I thought it was good. I just was a little disappointed by the middle second half.
I guess I'm going back and forth because I do like a good journey, and I feel like maybe that middle part was supposed to be kind of like was I too much like a Rebecca wanting a good story? Do you know what I'm saying? Is that kind of...
I was too focused on Rebecca being like, why are you such an idiot, and listening to this.
Why are you dropping acid with a child?
Dropping acid with a child and being so...
And hiding him in your home.
Empathetic to him and like trying to understand him. And then does she ever have that epiphany where she realizes that Warren did it? Or did she always like secretly in the back of her mind knew that Warren did it?
I think that's kind of what the quote was about, how like she deep down probably does know it's true. Because then he says to her like, I want to tell you, will you come to my group therapy session in prison? She
that
says
was
no.
really sad. That was really sad.
It was. The acting was really good. So I think she does. And then she does hear what he says in court. Maybe it like needed to be 6 episodes instead of 8.
Yes.
I think that's really what was going on here. Okay, also, it's interesting to me that they invented this queer romance. Maybe, arguably, as a way to draw viewers in. And maybe it worked on this viewer, even though I was already invested. But you know what I'm saying? It definitely didn't hurt. But then at the same time, toward the end, they had this like moment where Cam brings Josephine the tape recorder with Kelly's voice on it. Kelly giving her police interview, and that's kind of the sociopathic one. And she's like trying to blame everything on Josephine. She's like, Josephine's crazy. She's saying all this mad stuff. She's telling us to kill her. Da, 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 da. and like really throwing her under the bus. And then Cam like turns it off and is like, see, Kelly's just saying whatever she wants to say about you. And she's implying like, you should testify against her. And Josephine's like, no, I would never do that. I'm not a rat. And then Cam's like, all right, whatever. And like grabs the tape recorder to leave. And then Josephine like reaches across the table and like puts her hand on the tape recorder and is like, no, please play it one more time. I want to hear her voice. And I feel like there was this element here where these girls were really, I mean, it was very much a friendship. They were in this like fake gang CMC, but Kelly said, oh, I killed Reena for you, Josephine. And then Josephine's like, I really want to stay connected to this woman who doesn't care, this girl who doesn't care about me. And I'm kind of like, maybe they didn't find any evidence of it, but like maybe it was right there in the story all along and there's no evidence. Do you know what I'm saying?
The queer story between Josephine and Kelly?
Like, I don't know. Like maybe there was something there that was more organic that they didn't have to like be explicit about, but they could have like explored the girls' dynamic more than this fictional. Like, why did they feel so loyal to one another? Because they seem to imply that Josephine was jealous of Reena for having a family and a good home, but Kelly also had those things. And so I was just kind of curious. I guess I would have liked to like follow the girls a little bit more.
Yeah. But isn't there just an undying need to fit in when you're at that age that isn't tied to sexuality per se?
I guess, yeah, I'm not saying it's necessarily tied to sexuality, but I just feel like
themes of otherness.
And just like the dynamic, like female friendship at a young age, it's really like dramatic and it can read queer, but it doesn't have, they kind of show it in the flashback. Like that scene with Cam as little girl and Rebecca as little girl. And they're kind of like implying that Rebecca's really into Cam and wants her to be like her friend and not her brother's friend. I mean, then she's like, come into my bedroom and try on this dress. That seems a little bit more queer, but it also could just be normal, like what you were saying. Like you really want to be, you want your friends, you want your social status. Yeah. It might not have anything to do with sexuality, but no matter what, they kind of already had that wheelhouse to play in with these actual real girls who had a very close friendship, and they maybe didn't have to invent like a lesbian storyline. I don't know. Thoughts?
Yeah, I really don't know why they added this queer storyline if it didn't really happen. I'm confused by that element. Because what would this show be without Rebecca and Kim having their romantic...
Well, they could just be friends.
Right.
I feel like it would be just as powerful.
So that'd be interesting. So you're thinking that maybe the writers did want to, like, did think there were some queer implications with the younger girls, but then they put it on Rebecca and Kim instead?
I don't know. I mean, maybe, because I could see, like, if there's no evidence of that, I mean, obviously these are real people, those are real children, they were then convicted or whatever. I mean, maybe that's the reason why, or maybe they were just like, we need some queer audience people to tune in.
How do we get Lily Gladstone in this show?
Well, yeah, was that Lily? I don't know. Does Lily she doesn't only play queer characters, so I don't know. But yeah, I am curious about like the impetus behind that. At the same time, it's kind of nice, just like an organic part of the story that's not the main focus.
Yeah, that you went back and rewatched.
I did.
Twice?
455 times. What if I start talking in a British accent like Kelly Ellard?
I'm laughing because, Allison, your dress and your hair and the way you're holding the mic, you look like a 1940s.
Like His Girl Friday?
Yes.
Wait, that's amazing. I love that movie. I should also maybe describe that I'm alternating between hot and cold. I don't know if this is because I'm sick or what, but I have my like house coat.
Your shawl. And
I keep putting it on and off because I'm like hot, cold, hot, cold.
Yeah. We went semi-viral on our YouTube page, guys.
Okay, Joe, we're going to talk about this. I feel like you secretly don't want to do multiple episodes of TV, so you won't engage with me on my TV points.
What are your TV points?
Well, we can talk about a horse hands video first, and then I can. Even though if you listen to the podcast.
Horse hands is the next segment of Under the Bridge.
Was horse hands from? No. When was that?
It's the lesbian double feature.
Oh, yes.
Love, Lies, Bleeding, and Drive Away Dolls.
Yes. Wait. Actually, this is hilarious. So I was gone when Joe made this video, and it's just this little audio clip of us talking about how I used to draw horses for people, and then I was talking about how I used to draw lots of drawings, but I kind of didn't explain that, and then I mentioned hands, and Joe said horse hands, and he was like, what are you talking about? So anyway, Joe made a little video clip of it, and he used a lot of AI to generate the images that kind of mapped with what we're saying.
Which I don't condone.
But we just don't have the manpower to... We're feeding the hand that's going to bite us and kill us and consume us.
We're feeding it. Oh, yeah.
We are. We're like, here's our voices, here's our stories.
Was that how it really works?
I think it draws on everything on the internet.
Do you remember back on Facebook when boomers would post like, I do not condone Facebook for using my images against they like posted in all caps on their stuff.
Well, I'm not gonna lie. I'm using...
You did it?
No, not on Facebook, but I'm using Google Documents to like write a draft of this project I'm working on. This was happening when the public became aware of it. And so I I was like, oh no. I'm like, Google, I don't trust Google. So at the top of my document, even though I know it could do nothing to say you feel better, I wrote, I do not consent to any of this document being used for the education of artificial intelligence. And I highlighted it. It's still in there. But every time I'm like working on it in a public place, I like quickly scroll past the first page because I don't want anyone to know that I've written that. I feel like that's what's different about me and somewhat like a boomer is doing that. Like I feel like I'll do these things, but I will feel a lot of shame about them and I'll hide them. And I feel like other people don't care, which is nice. Good for them.
I'm so curious, like, what will be our generation's thing that we don't understand? Like,
I mean, I don't think we're going to get ChatGPT the way the kids are. Because they're going to learn it and they're going to use it. I mean, I don't know. Some people are using it. I used it one time to write something for me because it was for work.
But you understand how it works. Like,
yeah.
I'm saying, like,
yeah.
an older person posting on Facebook, that they do not want Facebook using their information. It's like they don't understand the concept of the fact that they post that is not going to work. So it's like, as people that grew up using the internet, like, will we always be adapting, or eventually will there be a point where there's something beyond the internet that we won't be able to understand?
I think if there's like a virtual reality type plane, personally, I just don't have a lot of interest in that. And so if that were to come out, I wouldn't engage or understand it.
Yeah. I mean, the short answer, yes. Every generation faces a period where they are relatively out of touch. But millennials already do have a term coined after them.
Oh, yeah?
The millennial pause.
Oh, yeah.
That's what it's like on TikTok.
But don't you think it's like hilarious? Were you paying attention to what Gen X was doing? Like, no. Why do they care what we're doing?
Well, I mean, because a lot of like
I get like, yeah, it's a marker of you're from the 90s if you're doing that, right?
Yeah.
Why does it matter that we seem older? Like, we are older.
I know. It's so interesting how they've made like all the generations were like battling each other.
It's so ridiculous.
Whereas when like the term millennials was coined, we weren't like being compared against Gen X. Like I feel like only when Gen Z appeared.
It might be because we're really big. And so the younger ones of us are closer in age to the older Gen Z people. But I don't know. It's fun to talk about though.
Yeah.
High socks. Yay or nay?
It's like horoscopes. I like high socks. That's like the one trend you know of. And I've heard you mention it 10,000 times.
And the jeans. The new jeans.
What are the new jeans? Just like the wide.
All the jeans. There's so many new jeans.
Just like wide jeans.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What are the other trends? I want to know even as I mock them.
I don't really know. I think it's interesting, like early 2000s fashions kind of coming back.
Yeah. I think they're out. Well,
I thought flared jeans and low-rise jeans were coming back.
Yeah, flare jeans are definitely coming back. Maybe that's because I own a pair and that's why I'm saying that. Because even though I don't care, I do care.
Allison threw away all her skinny jeans and then she was really upset. So she went to Marshall's and got a new pair.
I feel like there's something like, I think I put them in my donate bag and I haven't like taken them out.
They're just in your closet?
I have a big bag of things I'm going to go donate and I just never do it.
Because you don't have a car.
Yeah, that is why. That is why for that. But before we forget, we have to go back to horse hands. In the video, in addition to all these AI images, there's AI images, what I think are AI images of drawings of horses.
In this AI image, there's a man thinking of a horse, and it's kind of like a comically poorly drawn horse. Mm-hmm. And then later in the video, where the misunderstanding of a horse with hands comes into play, there's a haunting image. Loosely, you might say it's a horse. It also looks kind of like a lizard.
It may not have ears.
With no ears. With giant human hands.
So when I watch this, I'm going to tell you, yeah, it was pretty haunting. And I was like, yeah, that's exactly something that AI would come up with. I was like, oh, yeah. I was like, that makes a lot of sense. And I didn't really think about it too much. Okay, I'm sitting in my room. I'm doing my work. And Joe's in his room. Our rooms are right across the street from each other. We can poke our heads on, chat. He says to me, oh my gosh, our horse hands video is kind of going viral. And I was like, really? So we're chatting about that. And then maybe like 30 minutes go by and I'm like working, like it's almost the end of the day. I really want to be done. And so Joe is like, by the way, that video, he's like, I made it all with AI. He was coming to my room and I was like, yeah, I know. Like, of course I know what AI is. I know how it looks. And I turned around, he's like, except for these. Joe is holding 8x11 paper with his own horse drawings on them. I've never laughed so hard in my life.
I like had photoshopped them into the shot. It really helped sell the.
I think so.
It tied everything together,
and it really gave me a good laugh. So I hope we don't ever get rid of those.
Yeah, we'll frame them eventually.
All right, to go back to TV, I did think of a few things to ask you. Of true crime, limited fictionalized series, which ones are your favorite?
I'm bad.
Wait, I'll pull up some. I have some off the top of my head, but
Twin Peaks.
Mare v. Stone. Oh no, these aren't real.
Oh, true crime.
Yeah, The Act.
Oh, I'm not 100% confident if I ever saw it.
Okay, or like The Girl from Plainville. I don't think you watched that one.
No. But there's one show that we watched that I did love.
What?
That feels like It came and went really fast, but it was really well done. The Staircase.
That was another show that does remind me of Under the Bridge in very similar way.
But I thought that whole season was really good. Like, it was strong in every episode.
I agree. If Under the Bridge was based on a book, The Staircase is based on a documentary, but they also worked in, like Under the Bridge, bringing in the Rebecca Godfrey as a character. The Staircase brought in the French editor who was editing the documentary, who ends up falling in love with.
Oh, that was such an interesting,
like, shocking development.
Yeah.
But I think there's something about that where you remind the audience that this is like a retelling of like a real thing and kind of put you in that position of reckoning with what you're doing while by watching it. That makes it maybe more effective. I don't know. Which
also kind of ties into Civil War.
Yeah.
Photojournalism, specifically for people who take pictures of like war. And it's kind of like makes you like reanalyze these photojournalists. Like, yes, they are capturing this, but also like, what are they doing? Like, they also are kind of like glamorizing their position and the actions that are being done. It was really interesting.
I think I just genuinely like those
because it's
stories.
It kind of like elevates it's like puts a twist on the story. It's like, oh, like not only am I like a voyeur in this, but it's almost like they're trying to like turn the camera around and be like, no, this is like real life. Like, how are you like participating in this? I think that's really interesting to kind of like bring out the voyeuristic tendencies that we have while consuming this media.
Yeah, because kind of what I said last time in our first episode, I was like, you know, people are always going to do it. So it's good that these shows exist. But I don't know, maybe by putting somebody in there who is a storyteller and forcing you, or like somebody who's writing or editing or whatever it might be, forcing you to think about how we're not really a part of it and we're watching it.
But even the way this kind of changes. So Under the Bridge is about these children of the 90s. And at that time, media was very like centralized. Like, these girls have a fixation with Biggie Smalls and like this like gang, and they all want to like be a part of it one day, or they want to create their own version of it in their little small town. And there's this whole idea, like, you had the horrific incident that happened at Columbine with the shooting, and people are trying to like figure out like, are the violence of video games, are they to blame? The violence on TV, is that to blame? Like, all this like violence that children are consuming, and it's all like very like centralized. And then like also the idea of kids doing these violent things, they become famous, they're all over the news, they get more attention than they ever have in their entire life. So you almost get people doing it for the attention of it all. But then it's interesting as we go on and like media is becoming kind of like fractured, and you can kind of pick and choose like where you're picking it up. Like, I mean, even a show like Under the Bridge isn't getting nearly as much viewership as it would have 20 years ago. You have like TikTok and Instagram, you have Snapchat, you have like all these different ways to like consume media. There's like no one big place. I wonder how that affects a child, and like in a way it's easier to get like eyes on you and to get your voice out there. But at the same time, it's even harder in a way because there's just like so much noise to like stick out above the crowd. I'm like really curious like how violence in children, like how that's evolving over time.
Well, I think you can go into an echo chamber. You know, it's really weird that you bring this up because I was actually reading an article about a shooter near a college campus, and at the time the media portrayed it as like an incel related shooting. It happened in California. And then this article detailed how the mom, after this happened, she really wanted to like work on how can we prevent this from happening in the future? Like, what can I do? I want to understand my son's story completely. And I want to make sure there's a way to make sure this doesn't happen again. All these different groups, people like social workers, psychiatrists, law enforcement, schools, think of every angle possible. They're all kind of working on this in some sort of task force or something like that. And the idea is like there are always these signs that are leading up to this violent event. And if we can see the signs in advance, and if parents are aware, because oftentimes the parents are like, oh, we bought you a gun, or they don't care that their kids are in crisis. But this was not the case for this mom and dad. Basically, like in the days before, she like noticed changes in her son that she thought really positive. Like, he'd always had like extreme social problems. He really wanted to fit in. He never did. He was very jealous of couples and like didn't feel like he would ever find love or ever have that. And all those other kind of struggles in his life. I think he was of mixed race and maybe felt isolated because of that. But in the days leading up to the shooting, he ate more than he usually did. And mom's like, oh, that's great. Like, usually you don't eat a lot. And then he said, I think I might move away from my town. Like, he just like had all these like things that felt positive to her, like moments of like, oh, he's trying to change. He's going to be different. But it was actually signs of him giving up. And then also he had had a violent incident like within like the last 6 months where he had like pushed somebody, and he'd never done anything like that before. So the first time that happens, it could trigger something in you where you're like, well, what can I do next time? That kind of thing. There were a few other things I can't remember, but basically like there's all these like different factors because he was in these incel communities online and talking to people, but it almost seemed like he didn't think he was quite the same as those guys on there complaining. And incels, for people who don't know, are male virgins who are mad that they're virgins and think it's women's fault, and so they get really mad.
It's not like a clinical term, right? That's like derogatory.
No. I mean, I think they embrace it. I think they're like, we are the incels.
Really?
Because they're like, the world has made us this way. It's not our fault. It's the ladies' faults. Because they're such sluts.
I don't think an incel would want to be called an incel.
I think they do. I think someone who is an incel, or like someone who's a virgin who they don't blame other people, no, they're not going to be called that, or they're not going to be, they want to highlight their virginity. But these like people in these very specific communities, they're like look at what
society has done and outcasted
I'm a virgin. Us. Yeah, and it's everyone else's fault but my own, kind of a thing. Huh. It's very disturbing. But if you like looked at his interactions in those communities, it wasn't quite one-to-one where he was actually radicalized. It was just like a place where he could go and share his feelings and other people would validate it. Yeah. But then he kind of didn't really see him. I don't know. Anyway.
Well, plot twist, but I thought like it wasn't just tied to like the violence of video games. Like there were other factors too.
Yeah. And I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense. Like back then, there's one channel, and I think that happened in this poor case of Reena Virk, where a very specific story goes out into the media. The media called, like, didn't they call the girl the killer Kelly, and like just very sensationalized reporting versus the book, which was more nuanced. And I'm sure her father's book is even more nuanced.
Apparently about Warren, but not Kelly, though. I do think that's a really
really kind of a misstep. Like, I guess they didn't want to invent a reason, but it's kind of like
and they show
evil.
They show her parents. They're like so like caring, and they like show to
and they seem normal. Well, they did show one scene where the girl was talking on the phone, being like, "We're gonna kill her," and the mom's just like folding laundry. I'm like, is the mom not gonna say anything? Well, it was very odd.
Severe denial, it seems like.
Yeah, it was just a very odd. Honestly, I wish that hadn't been the case, but I kind of came away the most curious about her because I was like, that can't be the whole story. But I guess maybe it is. Maybe she really is. I don't know. I don't want to say. Anyway, I do think back then, stories were very like, this is the story. We don't have a lot of room for other perspectives. Now we have a ton of room for other perspectives, which makes for very nuanced TV, but less people are watching it. And you can get stuck in echo chambers that reinforce your own beliefs. And I don't know what to say about that.
Well, even like today, I was like editing a video for...
Your job?
No, for our YouTube page.
For our job.
Yes. I was not trying to find like violent images, but I was just trying to find images of anti-LGBT like rallies, but I couldn't find anything. It was all like
positive ones,
which I thought was kind of strange. Like,
now I want to try it out. Like, do you think because it like knows your Google searches, you're saying the algorithm's like, you don't want to see that, you want to see,
which kind of like disturbed me. I was like actively trying to see.
Yeah, you're right. When I Google it, I see a lot of, maybe it's like the way we typed it in, anti-LGBTQ protests. Maybe it's like thinking anti-legislation. Like if there's anti-legislation, people go to the streets to protest. Oh, I found one. It's in another country though.
I wanted like from like the 70s. I wanted just like an anti-LGBT.
Let me see. You know, maybe I wonder if it's because it's more like when there were protests, it's like an underground subculture, right? Like where the police would come and raid the bar, were people taking pictures? No, they're taking pictures of like Stonewall. And they're like, maybe that's why. Because people, they're taking pictures of the moment where people fought back.
Yeah.
I'll
have to do more research.
We love our research, even if we're not always the best at it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we have lots of wrong facts.
That we will do our best to correct.
Or you can email me.
Are you already closing out the...
No, not closing it out.
Conclude. So Under the Bridge, it ends with Cam getting an understanding of her heritage.
And she leaves the force to go explore it more deeply. And we should actually talk about what her heritage was. And that's why I was upset that they left it till the end. So we knew she was adopted. We knew she didn't really know where she came from. She knows she's Native, but she doesn't really have any details. And also the timeline of this is very unclear. It's not clear how long she lived at the home for girls, but it seems like she was old enough to remember when curfew was. So she must have been adopted as a teen, but she still doesn't have any memories of her youth. So she goes there and they're closing it up because of the scandal of what's gone on with all these girls living in this home who were part of this murder. And the woman who works there is like, we have to close. And she's like, oh man, okay. By the way, do you have my file on hand? And she's like, yeah, it's right there on the counter. Right there on the counter. Wow. As if they knew she was going to show up. That really annoyed me. And then she goes over there and she opens it up.
You wanted a whole subplot where they're like, oh, let me, everything's boxed up.
I'm just like, why did they tack this on to the end? Why wasn't this integrated into the story better?
Episode 9 where the woman at the home is just searching through boxes.
They like didn't think it through. Like, when was she adopted? I want to know the details. I just am annoyed that we didn't get the details. But okay, so then she opened it up and she found like a news clipping. It wasn't totally clear to me what she was learning, but then later on,
it was really confusing.
It was, and then she was talking with her dad.
Yeah, news clipping of a child. But I think if you like look at the text, it's like, no, I still don't actually understand.
I couldn't read it.
But the look on Cam's face is like, I felt like we were supposed to understand right away.
They did that a few times though, where they like
show Cam being horrified,
or they didn't reveal about the dad's record for a long time, and they kept like showing people reading it, and then they would cut away, and I'd be like, what did it say in there? So I think they like enjoy that technique, which sometimes it works, sometimes it's frustrating, but Then she talks to her dad and she kind of questions him and says, like, I know what really happened to me. You said that I was like abused and that was my story, but that's not true. Like, I was forcibly taken by the police and put up for an adoption. They were doing that to Native families. I assume that's something that happened in Canada at the time. I mean, I know a little bit about like there were the schools that Native children were sent to like quote unquote re-educate them to learn Canadian or Western ways. Or I keep saying Western. I did another one. I'm like, we are in the West, so maybe that's not the right term, because if a Native person, if their child was stolen and put into like a re-education school, I guess to learn like the colonizers' ways. I don't know what the right way of framing it is. Anyway, basically that's what happened to her, is that she was stolen from her family and put up for adoption. And then her dad claims not to have known. But then there's this really weird part where there's like a note in her file that says, she reads it out loud, like, I had bruises on my spine. And I was like, wait, what? And then I guess
because the dad was saying like, all we knew is that you had bruises
abused
on you, and then so the implication is that you were being abused. But she's like, the bruises were on my spine.
You know, I'm just gonna go look that up because I just feel like there was something there. Oh, birthmarks. Okay, that's what she said. Those are my birthmarks. Okay, it was hard to hear that. And then he says like, okay, he's like, but you know that I'll always be your dad. And she goes, yeah, but maybe I was supposed to be something else. Which I thought was really heartbreaking because that is her dad. She obviously feels connected to him in some way, but the idea that like she wasn't supposed to be there, and so that fact he will always be your dad, it's almost like a painful thing to hear, right? Because it's like, it's true, but it shouldn't be true, but yet it is true. And I don't know, it's really dark. Then, yeah, it ends with her going up to Alberta where her birth family is, and we don't get to see them reconnect, and I would have liked to see that. I'm just saying.
I don't even understand why bring on this character onto the show that was invented, that wasn't like real to one of the characters in the real life situation. Why was there this whole subplot?
I think the reason is because they wanted to have a character who was another woman of color who lived in this place, who could see this crime in a way that maybe nobody else at that time in that place could see it. Like, this girl was murdered. Yeah. She was one of the most vulnerable members of this community. There are quotes, like the quote about her back, where people were completely dehumanizing her, maybe didn't even see her as human. And Cam seems to be the only one that really gets the gravity of it and the danger of how people like her might be in danger.
But it was like insulting in a way because they didn't give her a real storyline.
That's what I mean. Or delve into this, like, if you're going to throw something like that in there, which is like, I assume, I'm not Canadian, but I just feel like that's like the many stains on our own history, like a stain on Canadian history. It's like, I feel like it deserved more than 20 minutes in the final episode.
Yeah.
Even though I like the idea that she stopped being a cop, I just felt like it was short-shrifted.
And then Rebecca gets her closure, and all this time she was so invested in Warren, she realized that, as the quote said before, she thought he reminded her of her brother, when in reality, Warren reminded Rebecca of herself.
And there was a really haunting image of her on the ferry going back to the mainland to then presumably go home to New York. And somehow, questionably, there's already a man in front of her reading newspaper with a giant article, an ad for her new book, which doesn't make a lot of sense.
No. In fact, because I thought she was still writing it like in a journal.
Was, right behind him. But it made me like think, oh, this person did go and tell a story. You know, it kind of makes you think of yourself as the audience. Like, that part was really interesting to me, to be reminded that
she profited off of this.
Yeah.
Like, she went back to this small town to write a story. She was already there when the murder...
So that's not what... I don't think that's what really happened. I think she was a writer and someone was telling her, there's a murder, you need to come back. Someone told her about the murder. And so she knew. This kind of was implied in the story, but she did see herself as like a punk kid. And she was only in her 20s when she went back to write this, which... And that's something the creator made a really great point of. Like, this woman in her 20s was able to like get at the heart of the story and like find out details of what really happened that all of these adults who lived there couldn't uncover. And the reason was because she like saw herself in the kids and could like other journalists try and pick them up in fancy cars and they would be distrustful, but she'd show up in her like beaten up car and they would open up to her or whatever. Okay, so that's Cam, that's Rebecca. And then I think one other thing we should say is like they had a really sad last scene for the Virks too, which is they're in Reena's room and they find the Biggie CD and there's like this really sweet, beautiful moment where they like decide to put it on and kind of like honor their daughter's memory, and the dad kind of like dances and the mom's laughing, and then like the CD like stutters and stops and it just like kind of ends with them in the silence in their daughter's room, and then they have ghost Reena being in the room with them, and it was really sad. And I was glad to, and then just to, in addition to writing his memoir about Reena, her father also launched like a very large influential anti-bullying campaign in Canada, and then the fact that, true to the story in which the mom, played by Archie Panjabi, forgives Warren, that seems to have really happened, and that they really were committed to doing that when someone shows remorse. And I think that speaks to a lot of strength.
It does. Yeah, it was really powerful. So that was our part 2 of Under the Bridge.
Yes. And if you like hearing multiple parts of different TV shows, let us know. I still really like doing it. Joe doesn't like to do it, but I have to wonder if not liking to do it makes you less inclined to punch it up.
Are you saying that my hesitancy to want to do this only makes you want to do it more?
No, I'm not saying that, but that's an interesting idea. No. Like the first time we had a certain reaction to it, and then our idea evolved. And I don't think we'd be as aware of the evolution in our thinking if we watched it all at once and then talked about it.
Maybe.
But we can try it out with hacks.
Hacks would be so hard to do.
Really?
Our most listened to episode is Love Lies Bleeding and
on YouTube. Because you titled it Lesbian Double Feature.
Lesbian Double Feature.
That's like what they did.
Has like 168 views on YouTube. Please give me the podcast analytics. Please tell me the numbers. What is our most viewed?
I will say, I'm pulling
episode?
it up, but I will say, titling it Lesbian Double Feature is a little like putting the lesbian romance into this queer cinema catch-up. It's baiting people to click on it. And did they listen?
Welcome to the internet, Allison. Welcome to the internet.
Did they listen to the whole thing?
No.
Okay, well, anyway.
Go on. Tell me how the most viewed
Wait,
podcast episode has 8 listens. Go ahead.
That's not true. That's not true at all. I think there's possibly 39 for our Taylor Swift episode. I think 39. But the point is, what does that have to do with TV? Doing multiple TV? What does that have to do with anything? I don't understand the connection, actually.
The TV episode has the least views on YouTube.
Oh, well, we're still going to do TV, guys. We're not going to just nix it.
But don't worry, my faithful listeners, those who are anti-TV, I'm fighting for you every day and trying to get as many movies on here as possible.
It's been mostly movies.
No, it is not.
Hasn't it been?
It is queer.
We've agreed to do the music ones. I'm not really a music person, so I think those don't count toward our total. I bet if we did double lesbian feature and we did hacks, which is actually bisexual representation, and the L word, I'm telling you, it would take off. I'm not doing the L word, but it would take off. Just don't give up on the TV. And see, but that's what I'm saying. Like, if you come to one and you don't feel like you really want to do it, it's going to bleed into your performance. Just saying.
Oh, that's what you're saying. I had a poor performance on this podcast.
Not a poor performance, but if you don't want to do it, you're going to be like, it didn't go well. We didn't have anything to talk about because you know what I'm saying?
But you're asking me to try to think back on 8 weeks of television. In a way, the TV show is kind of like a movie stretched out over 8 episodes.
So you're just saying you just want to do them all at once?
I think so.
Ever do mix it up? I just think we should do many things and not limit ourselves.
We tested the 2 parts.
You're going to base it off of that.
No, I'm just
only
saying, let's see how it goes by saying, I think some of our most compelling episodes have been the ones that we've talked about movies.
I think our Under the Bridge ones are good.
It was fine.
Ridiculous. You guys, please.
Subscribe. Queer Cinema Catchup is a podcast where we discuss movies, TV, and other miscellaneous topics
items
through a queer lens. I'm Joe.
And I'm Allison.
We are available wherever you can stream podcasts. Please rate us on Apple Podcasts.
Yes.
We have 0 ratings.
And please
And for the love of God, email Allison.
I would love to get an email.
queercinemacatchup@gmail.com.
Email me.
And we will see you next week.
For a... Oh, wait.
Special...
Oh, my gosh. Wait, we forgot. We have to talk it up.
What?
The most important thing's coming. We are really excited to watch the movie The Watchers, the directorial debut of Ashani Shyamalan, who is M. Night Shyamalan's daughter. Why are we so excited for this? You will find out if you keep listening to our podcast. But it's going to be a big day for us, a big celebratory day. Come and listen. Bring your popcorn.